Hello everyone. Welcome to another Powerhouse session at NestGen 2025. I'm Jay, and today we will be exploring the evolution in aerial security, understanding the FAA regulatory framework for docked BVLOS operations. So, I'll just quickly play this short introductory video for you guys. Perfect. So think about it. Traditional drone operations rely on visual line of sight. Operators watch screens and then react. But what if drones could operate autonomously from a dock, detecting and responding to threats before they escalate? That's exactly what we're going to unpack today. And for that, we have Akaki Kunchulia with us. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest, Mr. Akaki. Akaki is a recognized expert in BVLOS operations with a background in air traffic control and significant contributions to FAA policy development and unmanned aerial systems. His work on FAA initiatives and the implementation of rigorous safety protocols has played a key role in advancing BVLOS operations and integrating drones into the national airspace. So, welcome, Akaki. Before we start this session, I would like to have a big shout out to our sponsors for the day for making this possible. And just to run down a few housekeeping rules, we are going to have a live Q&A session. You can drop your Q&A questions into the box anytime, and Akaki will address them during the final segment. This session is being recorded, so if you miss anything, do not worry. You can always rewatch it later. And last but not the least, engage with us, share your insights, thoughts, and favorite takeaways on LinkedIn and Twitter, and use hashtag NestGen2025. And the top three posts will receive special NestGen hampers. So over to you, Akaki. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Jay. Hi, everyone. My name is Akaki Kunchulia. Let me share screen. Okay, Jay, let me know when there we go. I think I'm sharing, right?
Yes, you are, Akaki. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. My name is Akaki Kunchulia. I have more than 20 years experience, I think, in aviation field. Started as an air traffic controller, then moved to the UAS drone world since 2014, supporting FAA, NASA, on a bunch of different things, mostly related to the UAS. Starting from 2020, really dive into drone world and the UAS detect and avoid world. So been working with a couple of companies with their technology, and then doing quite a lot of waiver applications for the companies to get the operational approval in the US. So yeah, doing a bunch of things. And today I want to talk a little bit about kind of like what kind of like regulatory environment we have in the US regarding specifically for the drone drop operations. Let's start maybe with the Part 107 rule, right? So this rule, probably a lot of you heard about it, and probably a lot of you operate under that. Is that it is a rule for U.S. operations for VLOS, right? Like visual line of sight, and it is suitable mostly for the small scale operations. So when this rule was written, I think exactly 10 years ago, don't remember exactly, I think 2014, 2015, it was mostly for the hobbyists, right? Like for the small drone operators who wanted to fly around their house maybe, or like do some kind of like a roof inspection on their house, or again, like for this small operators, and then there was no rule to how to operate that. So that's why FAA came up with this rule. It is, again, for the small scale operations, right? So there are some provisions, or there are some regulations there, which, let's say, you are not allowed to do BVLOS operations, right? Beyond visual line of sight operations, or ops over people. You're, based on this rule, you are not allowed that. But you can require a waiver and exemption from this rule. So that's a lot of people are doing. I've been helping them. So yes, you can fly BVLOS if you get a waiver from the FAA. Same goes with the ops over people. There are certain regulations which can be exempted. So let's say, BVLOS, ops over people, there's altitude, and a couple of others. And these BVLOS waivers, usually what we're talking about today, is mostly constrained to the specific locations, and they have a bunch of other limitations. If you've seen one of the rules, actually there's a public website, Part 107 waiver, where you can go and see all the waivers issued by the FAA. It's public information. There's a link for that, so you can easily find that. So in that, there's a bunch of standard limitations, and then there's specific operational limitations. You won't really find specific details of the actual, let's say, my operation, but you can have maybe more or less an idea what's going on there. But going back to it has all these waivers have specific locations and limitations. So a couple of companies you might heard, they actually got the non-geographically constrained waivers, right? So technically they can operate wherever they want, but this doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, you go somewhere from a specific location and then fly there. You still have to do your homework. So still, while it is non-geographical constrained, it is, you have to comply with certain rules and limitations there. And specifically for this rule, as I said, that it was designed specifically for small operators. And then by the time, I think there was no big companies who were looking at the package delivery or long linear infrastructure inspections and so on. So for instance, even Part 107 itself, it doesn't necessarily allow the commercial operations for hire. So if you want to hire someone to deliver your package, that entity cannot do that. They have to become this Part 135 operator, right? Like a commercial, a kind of airline operator, and then you have to hire them and so on. There are some loopholes how you can avoid this and so on. I won't go into details for this, but still a lot of let's say big players. I think they're around up, I guess, up to 10 companies, maybe not 5 to 10, let's say that, who already obtained this Part 135 certification for them, so they can operate as an airline and then do package delivery or other big scale operations. So again, they maybe can operate Part 107 rule, but they have to be this Part 135. Today, I'm not talking actually about another rule, another general rule, which is Part 91, which is usually public entities drawn as a first responders, like police or other government entities, are using this Part 91 operations on their behalf. So that's kind of a different, I think most of the audience here, what we have is mostly for Part 107 rule. So it was, go to the next slide. Yeah, so what challenges we have while operating under Part 107, specifically for docked drones, right? So, and then I listed here several. There are probably a bunch more or less depending on who you are. First and foremost, DA, right? Detect and avoid. It's pretty close to me, so that's why I always highlight that. But we have to, for good or bad, like we have to detect other crewed aircraft, either they're cooperative or non-cooperative, but we have to detect those and then eventually avoid those. How do we do this? Let's say specifically for cooperative traffic, it's kind of ubiquitous now that ADS-B in, like you have to have ADS-B in, and then you detect everyone who is have ADS-B out signals. So you detect them quite far out, and then you eventually somehow avoid them. Another kind of like a big elephant in the room is this non-cooperative traffic, which are not transmitting ADS-B out signals. So the number of these aircraft, depending on the airspace, usually they're not a lot, but they're still there. In some airspaces, they are legally, they can legally fly. They can legally fly even without a radio, right? So in these kind of situations, we need to somehow detect this traffic. So there are a bunch of different solutions how we do this. You know, it is a radar, a visual, or acoustic, or different solutions. Especially now, there are like a bunch of companies who can provide you, depending on what's your appetite for that, like what is your actual operational area. Some solution might be suitable for some area, another for another. Another one, what I want to talk about is the C2, and specifically, actually, maybe, yeah, like a link, right, between the ops center to the ground station and to the vehicle. So this is becoming more and more an issue when we talk about the dock BVLOS operations, and especially with the remote operations. Because imagine if you have the ops center somewhere in one location, and then you actually have the dock, which is kind of like unmanned, right? Like no one goes there. It's like totally automated in one location, let's say at some kind of power plant, and then eventually a drone which like departs from this drone and then does inspection and comes back. So basically this link between op center to this ground station or slash dock to the vehicle, it is very important that we have really good connection, right? So and then you have to think about the latencies between, you know, the final operator and the drone. Maybe it's not a big issue specifically for the docked drones, because usually the distance from the dock to the drone is not that big. So usually there's a good C2 collection. But I've seen multiple waivers when people think that you know, the DAA is the biggest problem, but it appeared that actually a good C2 link was a problem. So you know, they mitigated the air risk, but like they couldn't have a solution for good C2 link. So that was a problem. So you know, like they could fly theoretically to, like, I don't know, 20 kilometers, but you know, their C2 link was not good. So just new operations, yeah. Specifically, if you have this remote operator somewhere out there, it is very important to have this like really good link between ops center to ground station, eventually to that vehicle. Ground risk, I think that's pretty obvious. Overflying over people not involved in the operations. Eventually, like, yeah, in 107 rule, we have to think about how are we mitigating risk of people on the ground when we are overflying them. If something happens with a drone, how we reduce the risk. There are a bunch of ways to do this. Let's say the first, now it's kind of becoming more and more popular, putting a parachute on a drone itself and then reducing that way the kinetic energy. If something happens, then you go with parachute, then it comes down slowly. Another thing is, let's say, like shelter, right? Like, so people can be under some roof or something, or they wear a helmet, or you just like notify all those people who are, let's say, in your power plant. When you inspect, you just notify them like, hey, there's a drone operation in these hours, so please wear helmets, and so on. So why I put it here is that as we go into like more and more operations, specifically with the dock drones, we're in actual, human operators are not there. So it could be pretty like some people might get kind of used to it. So like you don't even like pay attention to that anymore, right? It's like regular. So that, like wearing a helmet or like being shelter and so on, that's pretty important. Autonomy and automation. So this is when I was putting this bullet point here, I was kind of like laughing at myself because I can talk about this like 3 hours, but I'll try to do it in 30 seconds. So basically, regulators do not, and you're applying for the waivers, like regulators do not really like the word autonomy. So just try to stay away from that word and then put highly automated operations, because autonomy is like very heavy word, and to be honest, probably at this point we don't really have fully autonomous systems. They're highly automated, but like if it goes to some decisions, they don't necessarily take those decisions by themselves, right? So what regulators like to have, and they acknowledge all of these, and then they say like, okay, highly autonomous or highly automated systems, there should be some sort of like a pilot in the loop or on the loop, or like be a pilot manager or so on, right? So having that some human oversight over the operations is very important. So I've been warned by a lot of regulators, like, just don't use this word autonomy. You can use it for your marketing purposes and so on, but like when you go to the regulator, it's highly automated, right? And the last one, which is very important, and I think becoming an issue more and more, and I think we have to talk more about that. And actually, I give kudos to Flightbase for this, like integration, right? I know, like, what a lot of people when they're starting want to operate BVLOS or even BVLOS, right? So you're getting different technologies from different companies. So eventually, to integrate this into one entity and then have like actual operation, it's not an easy task. So like kudos to you guys, to Flybase, that like integrating like different services under one umbrella and then providing the service to the customers. I think that is very important, and then it will become more complex and complicated in the future. And then the companies who are trying to do this aggregation of different sensors, let's say, like different services, and then offering to the customers, that is like really, really important. And then it's easier for the regulators also, like, because when they see that, oh, these guys are using Flightbase, let's say, right? So okay, they know what is Flightbase are capable of. So it's like having this name and then a recognition from the different regulators, it really helps. So yeah, this integration, I think different companies will be becoming bigger and bigger. So I think it's good, because I can go and buy a lot of like different services or different hardware and software and try to integrate myself. Probably I won't do that, right? Like that's why I go on the market and then see what other companies can offer me. Okay, next slide. So yeah, drone docs and shielded ops waivers, right? So usually these waivers are approved on certain limitations and certain areas, right? So usually they are on a pre-planned routes with a strict geofence, which is kind of like a normal. What is really interesting is like our RPIC or pilot should be located in the US. So they tell you that, okay, if the RPIC is not at the site, it is okay, but that operational center should be in the US. You have to make sure that the takeoff and landing site is clear of obstacles and any humans, which is kind of like normal, right? And then that drone, the UAV, should be within, and put here this like 50 to 200 feet of the infrastructure or above ground level, like basically in this shielded airspace. At this point, we don't necessarily have any specific number or distance where FAA says that, okay, this is a distance which is in the shielded bubble, right? So it is dependent on actual ConOps, actual location, airspace, and so on. So what started a couple of years ago, I think they started with a 50 feet bubble, basically 50 feet within the infrastructure or above ground level. And then I think like last year and like several months ago, they even increased this to like 200 feet. So, 200 feet bubble around the infrastructure or ground level. And the last point here, that operations should be conducted only on the UAS and docking station that was identified in the ConOps. So if for some reason you're changing your drone or your docking station, eventually you have to reapply for, it could be probably like simple reapplication, but if it's not the same system, so you have to reapply for the waiver. And I guess this is another topic I can talk for like 3 hours maybe. But basically, what we talked about though before was that Part 107 rule and waivers and so on. So eventually, starting I think 2020, it was the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, which basically everyone from the industry came out like, hey, we need some solutions to scale up the BVLOS operations, right? Like a lot of people want to do BVLOS operations. So what do we do? So they came up with the recommendations. It was like months-long process, and eventually the biggest recommendation was that, hey, we need to have this specific rule, which would be for BVLOS operations. So then FAA started working on that. So FAA said like, okay, thank you guys, for your recommendations. And then it was kind of announced that they will start work on Part 108. Long story short, we're expecting that to come out sometime end of last year. It did not, so we're expecting now that it will hopefully come out in coming months, I would hope. And it will, as an industry, we'll have like 2 months to comment on this rule. Then eventually FAA will collect all these comments, adjudicate them, and then come up with the final rule. The best case scenario, it would be from my point of view also, like it would be end of this year, but I don't know, a lot of things could happen. It could get delayed. So what to expect now in this new rule, right? And then these are kind of my assumptions. So like, don't judge me on this, but this is what I expect. That I think we'll have some sort of like shielded operations will be somehow codified. So at this point, shielded operations, there's not even any definition from the FAA, or I think I think maybe Transport Canada has it, but FAA doesn't necessarily have anything like what is shielded operation. No one knows. So there will be some sort of like definition of that, and maybe a distance. I anticipate that there will be some sort of DAA will be required for most of the advanced operations, big package delivery throughout, let's say, big areas and so on. It will be, and we heard about that yes, it will be a lot of references to the industry standards. So let's say RTCA or ASTM or SAE for the matter, there are bunch of different standard development organizations working on the US standard. So this rule will specifically say like, hey, if you want to have C2, there's a standard for that, so you have to comply with that. Or if you don't comply, why don't you comply, and so on. So it will be like references. What this is also speculation. Well, there might be some kind of like less strict requirements for the ops and operations in mode civil, because mode civil is, we know that you have to have ADSB out. So maybe there will be some kind of like less strict requirements there. We don't really know. We'll have probably more granular ground risk categories, because right now we have rural, suburban, and urban. So we'll have probably more categories. And then last but not least is software management system, right? So I think we'll have specific requirements for like what kind of software is controlling your dog or your drone, and who can make the changes on that, how often you're changing the software, and so on. I think I have a last slide, and then we can go into questions. What to not to expect? Again, these are my speculations. I don't expect that we'll have millions of drones in the sky all of a sudden. I definitely don't expect that. That everyone can fly BVLOS, and then everyone can fly in any airspace or any geographical area. No, I think we still will have pretty strict requirements from the regulator. It will be just like a more baseline, because sometimes I've seen that we'll submit like more or less similar waiver for two different companies, and then they've been asked to submit different documentation. So I think what we'll have with the Part 108, we'll have more like streamlined baseline requirements from the regulator, and that way we can be prepared for that. I'm gonna stop right now, and then maybe we can go into Q&A, Jay.
Sure, Akaki. Thank you so much for this informative session on the BVLOS waiver. And I'm sure your insights on the approval criteria and the best practices for securing the waivers is going to help our audience today. So let's quickly just go to the Q&A box. We have a couple of questions here. So the first question is, how do organizations transition from traditional visual-based drone operations to BVLOS autonomous flights?
Okay, so that's a good question. I always tell people that it is good idea to start small and then increase, right? Like, hey, if you're not experienced, like do VLOS operations, get those hours, and then those hours really help when you submit to the FAA or any regulator that say like, hey, I've done this many hours of operations doing this, right? And then eventually, like when you're comfortable, and then sometimes you're like VLOS, but eventually you could be like kind of BVLOS, right? Like, so kind of like transitioning and then going into the BVLOS, that's a really good idea. It gives you more confidence to you in your operations. And then again, like showing to the regulator that you're not, this like someone who like wrote like 5 pages and then want all of a sudden flying to Class D airport or Class B airport for the matter. So just showing your progress from VLOS to BVLOS, it's a good idea. And then it's a good idea also for you that like you train, like you will find out a lot of things about your system. So yeah, that kind of like smooth transition I recommend to everyone.
Right. So we have another question. What measures ensure that docked BVLOS operations remain compliant with evolving FAA guidelines and industry standards?
Yes. So again, what we're hoping that maybe in the new rule, we'll have some sort of more clarity about that. At this point, there is no specific regulation which regulates the docked docks and so on. So it's very much kind of like a back and forth with the regulator, like, hey, what do you do with that? But what is also good, maybe that there are not necessarily a lot this dock companies, right? There are probably like several. So more or less regulator kind of maybe already knows what are they about. So just if you're not a manufacturer of that, and if you're buying from someone, probably, right, like try to get as much documentation from them, and then just like be like ready to answer those questions. So hopefully we'll get more certain like regulations, and I'm not aware of any standards body specifically working on the docs. Maybe in the future, if this becomes more and more popular, probably we'll have more content about that.
Right. We have a question from David. Are you seeing waivers being issued when no human observations is being used on the physical side, only using a remote pilot monitoring the screen in a command center offsite?
Yes, actually, we are seeing a couple of those, and that's why when I was in one of my slides, when I was talking about that good link between the ops center to the dock to the drone. So yes, I think eventually that's the future. That's what everyone wants to do, and then we are going towards there. And then just to have that good connection, good organization of your operations, that would be really vital, I think, like moving forward.
Right. So I think we'll take one last question. Does Part 107 prohibit China products, and what kind?
Good question. Part 107 doesn't. So it's a rule about the operations. So what do you have? What kind of like a rule? What kind of products you have on your? Basically, 107 doesn't say anything about the origin of your technology. Specifically, that you might be prohibited for something else. I don't know. There's a lot of things going on, right? But at this point, I haven't seen, so far, I haven't seen anything so far prohibiting anything based on the origin of the country. Maybe in the future, but specifically, I don't think it would be in the rule or in Part 108 rule that it will be like, hey, like no China products or something. I don't see it specifically seen in this specific rule. Maybe some other regulation or some rules come out, but yeah, this is purely about the operations.
Right. So I guess we've covered all the questions from the Q&A box. Sincere thank you to you, Akaki, for sharing your insights, and a big thank you to our audience as well for your active participation and making this session as amazing as always. So signing off. Enjoy the rest of NestGen 2025. Thank you so much, Akaki. See you later. Yeah.
Bye.